Hey everyone, and welcome to our 5 Questions podcast. In this series, we'll be asking fellow First Nations writers questions about themselves to get to know them a little bit better, and also get a chance to explore their creative minds and what makes them tick. My name is Kimmy Lovegrove. I'm a proud Ngarrindjeri woman from South Australia living in Newnham. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Boonwurrung people of which I live, and also pay my respect to their neighbours, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation of which I work and play. In today's episode, we'll be hearing from Beau Windon. We hope you enjoy, and don't forget to check out the other episodes in the series too. What do you do outside of your creative practice?
So outside of my creative practice, I suppose that means like also outside of reading, because I read a lot and that informs my creative practice. I do spend a lot of time sleeping and I like to go for long walks. I'm not really a public transport person, and I live in the city, so I don't have a car. So I usually walk everywhere that I go, but I quite enjoy that process because it really allows me to kind of take in the world, around me and what's happening. I suppose it's like I also love going to cafes and just sitting there and people watching. So many people will kind of go to cafes and you see them just like constantly on their phones, kind of lost in that. And I really enjoy just like disconnecting from my phone and like taking in what's around me and what everyone else is doing. I'm not a big fan of reality TV, but I'm a big fan of reality, I guess, and just, taking in what's happening around me. Like everything kind of feeds my creative process, right? It's one of those things that I just enjoy on a really innate level. And it is the kind of thing where it's like you see people and you start to imagine like what their lives are like and kind of really build up the story around them. And then that's the kind of thing that later on when I'm writing, I can kind of expand on.
What inspires you to create and why?
So I think when I first really started taking my writing and artistic practice seriously, the main thing that would inspire me to create was a need for escapism. I've had a lot of issues with my mental health in the past, and writing was one of those ways that I could escape from that and escape from my own drama and difficulties that I was having in life. I've always been really fond of like fantasy and speculative fiction. And so for me, it was like, putting these characters into this other world was a way to just get away from all of that. And then as I started writing more and more, I started seeing more of a need to work around a lot of my own personal, circumstances as well, because it's one of those things where when I was younger, I would always read a lot, and it was so difficult to find any kind of books that centered on characters like myself, Indigenous characters, characters with like these complex mental health needs or, neurodivergence. And when I did find books like that, I found that a lot of them tended to really like focus on the issue. So the book was about like, the issues, like these Indigenous issues, these mental health issues, neurodivergence issues, rather than being about the characters, with these circumstances and situations and just them living with it. So I really wanted to create stories and write about characters and about myself, just kind of living where it's like, my Aboriginal identity, my neurodivergent identity are a feature of the story, but it's not like centered entirely around that. Because I can find that a bit perverse, how so many, marginalized creators are so often forced to just write entirely about their marginalization, almost like some kind of literary porn in that sense, where you have these kind of, heteronormative, abled, white audiences or readers that just want to kind of get off on all of the tough times you've been through. And it feels like a lot of people that want to kind of read those stories about your experiences, they just wanted like focus on that one puzzle piece instead of like the, entire thing. And that really bothers me. And so when I kind of come to creating or writing anything, I try to think of it like that I am writing for, I see myself as my own ideal reader, I suppose. And I'm writing for like a younger version of me that kind of needed, this kind of story or this kind of, because I write fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. And so whenever I'm writing one of these pieces, I'm thinking, I want this to be something that I would have appreciated when I was younger, that would have helped me.
What is the main issue troubling you in the world today?
High income wealth greed and class inequality.
What is the one thing you wish the broader society understood when it comes to First Nations culture and ideas?
I think the one thing that bugs me the most is this expectation that there is only one type of real Aboriginal or one type of real First Nations person, when really, like, so many of us have had such a diverse upbringing that has been broken or disrupted by colonialism. It can be difficult for us to match those kind of expectations that a lot of people want when you say that you're Aboriginal or that you're First Nations. They instantly kind of like build up this expectation of what you should be like, and it's usually based around like old stereotypes from decades ago, that it's still like, okay, well, this is what First Nations person is like, and this is what I feel like you should be like. And when you don't live up to those expectations, they can start to look down on you. And it is always kind of, well, I guess like it's always white people, non-Indigenous people that kind of have that sense, which can be really disheartening from a place, because it's one of those things where, so many of us do wish that we had that upbringing that was more ingrained, in our culture. And it does feel like that was stolen from us because of, because of this invasion. And that's the reason why we can't live up to those kind of white expectations of what they want us to be.
What inspires you?
I am a big fan of the theme of failure. So I often find myself inspired by mostly like fictional characters that kind of go through those tough times and persist and can push through, and they don't need to succeed. They just need to kind of live with it and come through it the other side intact to inspire me. So off the top of my head, when I'm thinking about characters like that, I suppose like Mewtwo from Pokemon. I kind of think of that characterization of being artificially created and not knowing where their place is in the world and what they're meant to do, and trying to find that. And as they kind of build this, I guess, idealistic world or society with all of these other cloned Pokemon, and they go to battle with non-cloned Pokemon and realize that what they set out to do, or what they thought was right, it wasn't right at all, it was wrong, and kind of like leaning into that failure and instead pivoting their ideas into something new. I don't know. I always, ever since I was, young and saw that movie when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I was like, oh, I really like it. The idea that Mewtwo, I don't know if Mewtwo's a he or she or they. I'm just going to go with they. That Mewtwo was able to kind of accept that they were wrong and pivot into something better. And yeah, so I think that kind of encapsulates the type of character or person that I find inspiring. I mean, I could go into more detail on real people that inspire me, but I think that would be more as a fan rather than as like something that I aspire to or something that I would like to see more of in the world. Like, I could go on and list like a whole handful of different writers that inspire me, their style that inspires me and everything. But really, when I come to creating anything, I always kind of approach it from, I suppose, like a more idealistic sense. And that whole like theme of failure, acceptance, and growth is honestly I guess the most accurate inspiration behind my work. And yeah, Mewtwo was just the first character that like jumped off my head because it's something that I've written personal essays about before. But there's a whole ton of different characters, both real and fictional, that I look at their journey and just what they've been through and their kind of perseverance. And that's like, I suppose that like it kind of ties into, my heritage and First Nations story, is that we have had to, really persevere through a lot of destruction of our culture and the invasion and everything. And perhaps that's why I've got this subconscious attachment to those kind of thematic ideas.
This episode was brought to you by the Blak Bright Festival. Thank you for listening.